back at home base. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Glacial Geek Deep Thoughts, Thin Coats with me, Phil the Glacial Geek. Today, I'm coming to you back again here from Savannah, Georgia, where I will be discussing the topic I'm going to be discussing. Well, first of all, I want to wish all of you a Happy New Year. This is the first Deep Thoughts of 2018, and hopefully it'll keep going very strong throughout the year. You guys keep watching. I've been really pleased with the how much you guys have enjoyed this segment. It started out kind of on a whim, just thought I'd throw in something else. Didn't expect it to do quite as well as it has been doing, and it's so I've been pleasantly pleased with how it's going. And I'm glad you guys have enjoyed it, so hopefully 2018 will bring a lot more deep thoughts and plenty of thin coats as well. I wanted to try to start off the new year. We talk about our resolutions in the new year, and a lot of them usually involve us trying to clean up messes in our lives. So be that dieting or exercise or quitting smoking, whatever it might be. We are always looking to clean up the mess that is in our lives. So I thought a good topic to run us off here during the time of resolution would be to talk about how to clean up our lists, how to make sure that they aren't just a giant mess, and make sure that they're doing what we want them to do. So how do I turn my list into a proper list, as opposed to, I know I've talked about before about making lists and what you need to think about. There's a lot of ways to go about that, but fine tuning a list also is another skill that becomes very important, especially if you're going into the tournament scene and trying to figure out from there where you want to go from that. Fine tuning a list becomes very important. So making sure that you can get out and make a list, and then make sure that you can tune a list, is also very important. So making sure that your list is not a mess and what to do to clean it up is what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm going to be working on my Hell Blasters. So these are my other squad of Hell Blasters, as you can see them there. This is the Sergeant. He's all good and done there. But the other guys, as you can see, are missing a shoulder pad on their left shoulder because I left these sprues. I got the upgrade because I bought the Dark Angel specific ones. I left the Dark Angel upgrade sprues at home when I went off for family visits during the holidays. So I was able to build the rest of them, paint the rest of them all the way right up until actually doing their shoulder pads. So I had to do that when I was coming home. And I thought I'd show you kind of a little bit of a tip when dealing with these. So they come on here, and if you cut them off, I don't know if anyone's ever tried to paint a shoulder pad without anything else. It's very, very difficult. Most of the time what ends up happening is I end up clipping them out, and I end up making a little bit of a like a little finger there in like some blue tack, and sticking it on there and painting it, which is a little bit frustrating, a little bit annoying. Trying to keep it together and keep it sturdy and make sure it doesn't fall off, and then having to pick it up, and you get paint all over your fingers, or which, whatever. But it's annoying. It's annoying to paint shoulder pads without having anything to hold on to them. So I came up with a method, actually, that I think works very well. So most of these upgrade sprues, you can see that they're just connected there on the bottom. So it's very fine connections down there. But what's fun to do about them is that they very easily can snap out of the upgrade sprue here. And you can see that what I'm doing here is just kind of snapping out just the parts of the shoulder pads, so that I end up with this like here, and then just snap them again, and voila, we have shoulder pads that are now held together on here. I did it on the other squad there. And then what you can do with these is you just take a bit of sticky tack, stick it underneath here, and now you've got a nice handhold to hold those shoulder pads, and they'll stay on that sprue until you're ready to be, until you finish priming them, painting them, and then you can just clip them off with here, and you have two little spots that you have to touch up with the paint at the end, and it's super easy, and then they're ready to go. Glue them onto your shoulders and you're good to go. So that's what I'm going to be working on. Little modeling tip of the day. If you're going to be doing in sub assemblies, if you're just building them totally, it doesn't make a difference. But before you paint them, but if you're going to be doing them sub assemblies, the reason I like to do these guys in sub assemblies, and the reason this guy has his shoulder pads, is anytime that there's going to be a gun held across the chest, it's very frustrating to try to paint inside there. So I like to have the arm pieces come off as a bit. So I'll build the whole torso with the head, paint all of that, put the arms together with the head, or the arms together with the gun, paint all that, glue it in, then glue on the shoulder pads, and then glue on the backpack. I've got the backpacks all ready to go. Just didn't have the shoulder pad. So I got the shoulder pad. Once I get that done, once I get these done, I'll glue them on and they'll be done, which is great. I've also got to dry brush the base, but that's super simple. So I'm going to be working on that as we talk about the different topic. But before we actually get into the topic, I do want to talk about my road to the LVO, because LVO is coming up very soon. Ooh, this is tight. Should have opened that before. But the road to LVO. At the end of the month, I'll be going off to LVO, and before that, I'm actually going to be at Siege of Augusta here in Georgia. It's going to be a smaller 32-player tournament. This is totally stuck right now. 32-player tournament. That's going to it's going to have whatchamacallit, 32 players, but it's going to be over 2 days. And it should be a lot of fun. I'm pretty excited. There's a bunch of guys that are coming from Savannah. They're going to be going to this, which should be pretty interesting. Oh, there we go. Got it off. Jeez. So it's going to be a 32-player tournament, like I said, over the course of 2 days at the Siege of Augusta Wargaming Convention. So most of it is geared towards other systems, so more, I think, historical wargaming more so than anything else. But this is the first time they're having a Warhammer tournament, which is kind of exciting. So I'll be heading off doing that with a bunch of guys from Savannah, taking part in that. I'm actually going to be going up with Marcus, who we went to Warzone Atlanta together. There's a couple other guys. I know Greg. You've seen him. He had the Ultramarines. Todd's going to be going. He has Chaos, which actually I'm going to be getting a battle report with him with a little bit of a tournament test prep. So he's going to run his tournament test press, and I'm going to run my list too, which is kind of exciting. So you get to see my probable LVO list depending upon how it performs. Because if it performs awfully, I'll probably change it before I go off to LVO. But my list that I'm going to be taking off to Siege of Augusta at least, just to see how it goes. There's a little bit of tweaking, which kind of gets us into the topic that we're going to talk about today, trying to figure out how your list is, if it's going to perform the way you want it to. So yeah, let's talk about that. Let's go into that, because that's kind of where I'm at with my list right now. Is I came up with a concept, I built a list, it seems strong, it seems like it's going to do everything that I want it to, but how do you then figure out if it's actually doing what you want it to do? And there's no real waste or chaff involved with the list, because that's important to make sure that you're not just wasting points, especially when you get into tournament level. Wasting points is, you just can't do it. If you're wasting points during a game, wasting points with the list, have units that aren't doing anything for you or aren't doing what they should be doing for you, then you're going to be losing. You're going to be losing those games and those tournaments. And I've had plenty of times when I've gone up to tournaments where I thought I had a strong list, and then when I get there and I start playing, they just don't do what I want it to. They look on paper like they're supposed to do this, but once you actually start getting there, they don't start doing what they want to. And it takes a bit of detachment and a bit of special thought about the different things and the different units and what they're doing to see if they're actually doing what you want them to. So the first thing you need to do when you make a list, is make a list. That's what you have to do. Bare basics, just make a list. Make sure it's battle forged, make sure it fits the point requirements for the upcoming tournament, if that's what you're gunning it for, or just make sure that it fits within the games that you're going to be playing with your friends, whatever it might be, whatever you're making this list for, make sure it fits that. So make sure it's battle forged, which is most of the time. Make sure it fits within the point values that you want it to. And after that, you've got a list. So worst comes to worst, even if you don't get to test it, don't get to prep it, You can go to whatever the game is, you can go to the tournament, and you'll be able to play, and you won't have any problems. You'll be able to get there, and you'll get to do what you need to do, and it's, you can have fun. And that's the whole point of tournaments, honestly, is to have fun. Going into a list and checking it twice is more about trying to get better. So this is starting into 2018. I just got the new codex, so at this point, I'm trying to hone down a list that I can be competitive with this year for my Dark Angels, And that's not to say that it's the only list that's competitive. It's not to say that it's the only list that will do anything for the Dark Angels, but what it is my list, and it's what I want to be doing with it. So I made a list. I make my list. I check it out. It fits within the point values. It gets me, it optimizes my CPs, my command points. It optimizes my ability to effectively do what I want it to. So now I've got a basis that I can work with, that I can start to fine tune. First thing you need to do is check out your HQs. Because this is, I've noticed with my list when I play games, because not all of my lists do I get to hone down and fine tune. A lot of the times I'm putting together lists that just seem fun to try out different units, just to see what happens. So I do that a lot with my battle reports. You'll notice a lot of my battle reports are not with lists that are super competitive. They're not the kind of list that you're going to see at LVO. They're not the kind of list that you're going to see most anywhere else other than just a friendly game, which is fine. That's what lists, a lot of times, that's what games are supposed to be. That's what lists are supposed to be. So I've got no problem with having that as long as that's what it's supposed to do. But once you get to a point where you want to narrow it down, you need to fix it. And the first thing you need to look at is, like I said, your HQs. Because oftentimes with my lists, I'll realize that my HQs are not doing what I want them to do, even though they're on paper supposed to do a certain thing. So first thing you need to do is you need to make sure that your HQs aren't taking up extra space. They're not taking up too many points for what they're supposed to do. So, for instance, say I want to have a librarian in my list because I'm afraid of some smite spam. I want to have some kind of psychic defense for a key portion of my army, right? If that's the case, then all I need to do is bring a regular librarian with a force sword, the cheapest option for a librarian that I can possibly find, and put him back there. He fills the role of HQ. He sits back there giving me my psychic defense. He does what I need him to do. If I was running Ezekiel and the entire time he just sat back in the back of my gun line just waiting for the entire time, that's like an extra 70 points or so, like a little bit more, maybe I don't know, something like that. It's like between 50 and 70 points extra that I'm using on Ezekiel that are getting wasted. Because Ezekiel is good if you want to get in people's faces and you want to be able to throw a whole bunch of, you want to have a whole bunch of different options for your powers through Trephination, through Interromancy. And I want to be able to use a whole bunch of different ones for different opportunities depending upon what's presented to me. And I want him up in the front lines, giving the ability for these guys to get back up and get back in the fight, even if they die. Because if I'm spending the points for, say, a Deathwing Knight, I want him to be able to fight. And if he's not fighting, if he gets killed before he's able to throw in his punch, then that's wasted points for me. So Ezekiel's there to do the benefit of a banner and the librarian and get all up in their face with a whole bunch of different options from Interromancy so that he's able to effectively aid in my ability to get in their face. But if I'm running a gun line and he's just sitting in the back behind all of my Hellblasters and sitting back with my Predator, then that's a waste. He's not doing what he's supposed to do, and he's not doing what I need him to do. And at that point, something needs to change. So I look at it and I see that what I need is I just need any librarian to sit back there so that if something gets within 24 inches and tries to smite me, or something gets within 24 inches and tries to I don't know, even trephinate me, or whatever it is, I want to have the ability to psychically defend my units and defend myself. All I need is a regular librarian. So at that point, if that's what I'm going to do, I've got a regular librarian back there. Don't take Ezekiel. I've fine-tuned the list, and now suddenly I've got some extra points that I can use to throw in. Even at worst, you throw in a scout squad that can help you with creating a bubble. Perfect. That's what it's going to do for me. I saved myself some points because I didn't need the special character. I just wanted the regular character. And then you can have it go the other way around, where suddenly I'm going up here and say I've got a gun line that's going to be static. So I've got some, say I've got some dreadnoughts, or I've got some hellblasters that I'm just going to be plopping inside of a ruin. So they've got that 2-up armor save, and they're just going to be sitting in there. They're not going to be moving. The whole point is for them to sit back on an Eternal War, an Emperor's Will objective. They're just sitting back there, lobbing down shots. Maybe they're going to be sitting back there with a whole bunch of Devastators. That's what they're going to be sitting back there for, right? If I run a Master with them, they get to reroll 1s. Well, guess what? If those guys aren't moving, and I don't plan to move them, they're already rerolling 1s because of Grim Resolve. So suddenly that Master becomes obsolete. There's no need for him. But if I have some extra points to roll around, maybe I throw in Azrael instead, because he gets to then give them a 4-up invul save to the Hellblasters and the Devastators at least. He gets to give them full rerolls so that even on those 2s that I'm missing, I get to reroll them. If anyone's seen some of my battle reports, you can see how important those 2 get rerolled can sometimes be. And suddenly, if I've got the extra points to throw in there, why not? Now he gets to sit back there. He's got extra wounds. He's got that 4-up invul save that he's giving to all of the infantry back there. He's giving them rerolls for days, not just 1s, and you get to, you get the added bonus of having Azrael back there. And he's a really great warlord because he gives you extra CP just for being your warlord. So suddenly now it's worth it to throw those extra points into my HQ, because having that Master back there sure fills the HQ slot, but he's doing me no good back there other than that, If I wanted to be more mobile and I wanted to maybe move that Hellblaster squad up there, yeah, then a Master works. He fills that role. He gives me those that reroll of 1 even if they move. And he can do a really good job for that. But if he's just going to be sitting back there with a static gun line, he brings nothing to the table at that point beyond just filling an HQ slot. And at that point, maybe it's worth throwing in extra points to get some extra stuff in there. Or maybe it's just a matter of choosing which HQ you want to do. So if you're going to run that static gun line, you don't have the points to bring in Azrael. Maybe instead of running that Master, you now run a lieutenant or a Primaris lieutenant, something like that. You now have an HQ that's giving you added bonuses. He's giving you something. So by just changing out that Master for a Primaris lieutenant, you're now getting to reroll the 1s because you're staying still with Grim Resolve. In the instance of Dark Angels, this is why I'm using it. It's always going to have the particulars are going to vary based upon what army you're running, and you're going to have to know what those different things are working for your specific army. But these are the kind of things that you need to look for. So now I'm going to get to reroll 1s to hit because of Grim Resolve still, even though I lost my Master. I'm also going to get to reroll those 1s to wound because of my because of the lieutenant back there. So at that point, it's a value added by just changing the type of HQ. You're not saving many points by doing that. They're about equal points. Actually, I think they're almost exactly equal points, if I'm not mistaken, between a Master and a Primaris Lieutenant. But because you managed to switch them, you're now getting value added as a Dark Angel player in this instance, so that you can get the value added. Now you get to reroll 1s at both ends of the deal, which is perfect. That's exactly what you want to do. You want to make sure that everything is adding to your ability for your army to succeed. So that's the first thing you need to check out. Make sure HQs are doing what you need them to do. Make sure they're the proper HQs for what you're doing, and make sure that they can bring a value to your army beyond what you're getting from things elsewhere. So another instance here. Say you want to have a very fast army, and you want to throw them up, run them into your enemy's face. They want to be moving up the board. They want to be very mobile. Then having a Master on the feet is not going to be helpful. Having him just walk around is not going to be helpful. But maybe if you have one with a jump pack, now suddenly you get to go up there. You're rerolling the 1s that you don't get because you moved with Grim Resolve, but now you get to reroll the 1s again. By adding a jump pack onto the guy, he's now going to be where you need him to be, doing what you need him to do. Because if he's on feet and you're just running a bunch of bikes, he's going to fall behind real quick. So maybe you run him up there, or maybe you run a Talon Master. Whatever it might be, you need to make sure that your HQs can be where they need to be to do what they need to do. The next thing you need to do when you check your list is make sure you have the proper support to accomplish what you want to do. So for instance, my very first list in 8th edition had a bunch of Predators with all las cannons, and dreadnoughts with las cannons. It was las cannons for days, all the las cannons you could want. I ran up against a mech heavy list, a bunch of dreadnoughts with an Iron Hands team, and they had Azrael back there, and they just obliterated the list. They just blew them up across the board. It was brutal, and they did that job very, very well. But when it came down to it at the end of the day, I also ran into a horde of orcs, and they overran my list. So this kind of goes back to what I was talking. They overran them. They just overran me. I lost the game because I didn't have enough shots to handle a whole bunch of orcs. All of their battle wagons were dead first turn. I was able to blow him up. His Morkanaut was also blown up, but he still had like a ton of bodies. Probably about, 50 bodies that were coming across the board. 20 Storm Boys. It was unbelievable the number of orcs that he had in this list, and they just overwhelmed me. There was nothing I could do about it. So this goes back to my discussion about how to make a list that you need to be able to handle all different comers, but you need to make sure that you can support what it is that your list is designed to do. So like I said, I really wanted a list that could go out there with las cannons and blow up the big heavies so that I don't have any nasty surprises that are going to come my way. So if someone comes at me with Mortarion, someone comes at me with Magnus, someone comes at me with a Stormlord, Stormlord or any of the other Baneblade variants, I felt confident with my list that I could take them down before they could cause me some serious trouble. Even if I went second, I still thought I had enough that I could handle that. But if they weren't going to be able to do that for me because they're just getting overrun by a bunch of conscripts or they're getting overrun with a bunch of orc boys, then they're not going to be able to do their job, and I'm not going to have a list that's effective at that point. So what I need to do at that point is make sure that I can support the aim of my list. So if I want to have those las cannons to be able to shoot the big things, then I'm going to need to screen them to make sure that people can't get in close contact with me, because the second you run into a predator, they've got to fall back and they can't shoot. Sure, I can spend points on a stratagem for that, but that's wasting command points that I could use for other things, and I don't want to be doing that. I've only got a finite number that I can use, especially if your warlord trait is not rolling fives and you need them to come back. You've only got a finite number that you can use during the game, and if you're wasting them on things that you can prevent from happening, then you're hurting yourself. You're hurting your list. So I've now got this list that I have a bunch of las cannons that I want, and I need to make sure that people aren't going to be able to get in touch with them real quick. I want to make sure they can stay back, shoot what I need them to shoot, and just keep shooting all day long. So now I have an option. I can either create some synergy in my list that can handle the hordes, which you should do anyway because you never know what you're going to run into in a tournament, or I can just make sure that they're kept safely behind a nice screen. So for instance, I can run a bunch of scouts, and if I've got those scouts that I can put as a roadblock between my heavy shooters and his assaulting units, then they're the heroic efforts of Jenkins will help prevent my predators from getting tied up. And if they run up there, kill that screen, they're then out in the open and I can shoot them. So you need to make sure your screen is far enough away. That comes down to tactics, and that I'll probably go into in another deep thoughts. But at that point, the screen did what it's supposed to do because I was able to support. My list is able to do what it's supposed to do. It gets to do what I want it to do. I'm going to be running at it with the las cannons, shooting everything in sight. But they're able to accomplish what I went out to do because they were able to go and they were able to shoot because my screen was able to hold up the assaulting units, and then they were able to wipe them out afterwards. So at that point, you need to make sure that your list is supporting the main goal of your list. So sure, you have to be able to handle all comers, but every list should have a focus. So it doesn't have to be a Death Star, it doesn't have to be one specific unit, but it should have a focus. So if I'm running a Ravenwing heavy list, the focus of that unit is the ability to run around the board really quick and be able to jump on objectives, shoot units, and harass them from different angles. If I don't have forces that are able to provide long distance support for that, then they're going to get in trouble real quick because they'll either be caught up in a never-ending combat, or they're going to have units that if they can't wipe them that first turn, they're going to fall back and suddenly they're right up in front, getting shot at by the enemy's gun line. So perhaps if I want to have a whole bunch of really fast units because I'm running Ravenwing Heavy, Or if I want to run only Raven Wing, then I can run some support units like a Land Speed or Vengeance or something like that. So it can sit units that can sit back, provide a bit of a gun line support to shoot down the board and distract their shooters, so distract their artillery, distract their tanks, whatever it might be, or just take out their tanks and their artillery, which is even better if you can do that. Or if I want to run a gun line, and the main goal of my list is to have a bunch of Hellblasters, a bunch of Dreadnoughts, shooting down the board, killing things, then I need to be able to support that by, like I said, creating the screen to keep away assaulters, having units that can harass the back line so that they can't focus on my gun line and they can't just move up and take me out. I need to have units that can help support the main thrust of my list. And every list, no matter what list, no matter how much of an all-comers list you create, it should have a specific aim, which is the next thing that you need to make sure that your list has, which is a specific aim. If you create a list that's just a hodgepodge of a whole bunch of different units that aren't supporting each other, aren't going for the same goal, you're not going to do well. You might get lucky, but honestly, the odds are you're not going to do well. And what you need to do is you need to be able to have a goal when you have your lists. So, for instance, my LVO list honestly is very gunline heavy. So it has Azrael back with a bunch of Hellblasters and a Lieutenant, just re-rolling everything for days, giving up that 4-up invul save. That's the main thrust of my list. To support it, I've also got some Dreadnoughts with some las cannons to take out some bigger, heavier, nastier things that might come their way before they can overrun my Hellblasters. In addition, I have Reavers that can drop down behind enemy lines and just harass the crap out of my opponent, so that if they've got two options, either keep focusing on my Hellblasters, in which case my Reavers are just going to run rampant behind their lines, or they take out those Reavers, and those are shots that are not coming down after my gun line. So I've got these units now that are designed to help support that. I've also got a bunch of Scouts whose job it is to screen off these units, and I've got some Razorbacks that are able to run up midfield and throw down a bunch of DACA to take out any hordes that might be coming to overrun my gun line. But at the end of the day, the main thrust of my list is this gun line. It's this green wing of just really strong shots that are able to go down there and take down most targets that they might want to point and shoot at. And I need to support that with the rest of my list to make sure it does well. If you want to run a Raven Wing list that runs really fast down the board, that's great. But if all it does is run down the board really fast, it's very easy to counter it and get tied up if you run into their screens. If you run into if they have flanking units, if they have the ability to just shoot you down off the board before you get at them, then you're not going to be able to do what you need to effectively. So suddenly now you've got you need to be able to have in your list ways to support that. So create a bit of a gun line. It doesn't have to be the main thrust of your list, but have something that can shoot across the board to take out their screens, or can shoot across the board to take out their enemy artillery, whatever it might be. Have your own screening units that can go up there to engage their screens so that you can run around them with your really fast attack bikes, or drop down with your Inceptors, or whatever the main thrust of your list is. It should have that main thrust, and they should all be supporting each other. So, like I said, if you have a bunch of bikes and you just holding them back on your own end, shooting like a gun line, then you're not utilized. You don't have a point to your list, and you don't have a utilized thing. And if you have a whole mix of everything all at once, it's not doing what it should do. You should be able to look at your list and go, okay, this is what my list does really well. And then you turn around and you go, how do I support that? By adding in these other things. So adding in a bit of a gun line to help clear the path for my bikers, adding in a few harassing units to keep the enemy distracted from my gun line, whatever it might be, you need to be able to support it. And if your list doesn't have an aim, a main mission, and if it doesn't have support, it's not going to do well. And you're going to end up getting lost. You're going to end up having trouble going down the road as you keep playing with it. So those are all things that you need to keep in mind when you start looking at your list and seeing what it can actually accomplish. That's really, honestly, those main things. Make sure your HQs are properly chosen and designed to do what you need them to do for the thrust of your list. Make sure your list has a thrust. Make sure your list has a focus as to what it's going to do and how it's going to do it. And make sure that that main focus is supported by other units and other abilities within that list. And if you can do all those three things, you're going to have a very strong list, a focused list, a list that's not a mess. And that's the first step to creating a really competitive list. You know, I talked about how to make a competitive list. Make sure you can cover whatever you're going to run into, which is all fine. But if it's covering whatever it's going to run into in a completely haphazard manner and they're not properly thought out, it's still not going to do well unless you start to get, like I said, get that focus of your list, get the concepts that you want to do going forward, and make sure everything is working together to accomplish the goals that you want it to. Because that's really, at the end of the day, what's going to get you the victory. That's what's going to get you the win, is if you're able to go forward and just, kick a whole bunch of booty. But yeah, like I said, those are the key things. The other things that you can look into is see if other units do things more effectively. So for instance, my first lists had assault squads in order to drop down behind enemy lines and harass the enemy and do what I needed them to do that way. But then someone mentioned Reavers, and I looked at them, and it was for 15 points more than a 5-man assault squad with jump packs. I could get twice the number of wounds. I could get extra attacks, and they could do exactly what those assault squads were doing, except more effectively. It was harder to kill them. They could strike with a harder hit, and suddenly I realized that those units that the assault squad on paper was going to do what I wanted it to, but these Reavers were going to do it better. And it was only 15 points more. That was an easy 15. You can easily find 15 points in a list if I needed to, and it was going to do what I wanted it to much more effectively. And suddenly I started running those Reavers, and they were doing the job for me. They were doing exactly what I wanted them to. They were doing exactly what I wanted the assault squad to do, that the assault squad wasn't doing. Is what it came down to. So go through your list with a fine-tooth comb after you get those three things, and then you can start, like I said, honing. And it's all about just figuring it out. And you can't have emotional attachments to units. So for instance, like I said, I really love my las cannon predators. I loved running them. I was running them back in when the 7th edition codex dropped, and we could take them as the squad. They were one of my go-to units, and they did a lot of work for me in tournaments, especially early on once we got our 7th edition codex. And there's always going to be a place in my heart for those las cannon predators because of what they could do. But looking at it, I could get the same number of las cannons and have them be slightly more effective because of their ability not to lose effectiveness as they got wounded if I was running them on dreadnought chassis. So running my mortis pattern dreadnoughts with 2 twin las cannons, or running some venerable dreadnoughts with some las cannons, whatever it might be, I was able to get the las cannons that I wanted to be able to shoot my enemies, but I was able to get them at a cheaper cost to myself. And if I can do that, then suddenly I have a more effective list that I could spend those extra points on something else. So at first it was going to be spent on assassins, and now it's going to be spent on extra hellblasters. So yeah, and then you look at it and you see what it can do. And again, I started looking at different units. I started seeing how effective they were. I looked at my list that I brought to Warzone Atlanta, and I realized that my Hellblasters were very effective then. Once we got our Codex, I realized that they became even more effective with the ability to with Weapons of the Dark Age stratagem and our ability to use some of those different stratagems. And I realized that I needed to focus more on those. So I went out and I got some more, and they're going to be a main thrust of my list going forward, is these Hellblasters, because of how good they are and the fact that they can now work with Azrael way better than my Dreadnoughts or my Predators could, because of the fact that they can now get his 4-up in Vol Save and the others can't. So yeah, you need to look at lists and make sure that whatever the units are doing, that there aren't units out there that can do it better. For instance, for myself, I'm really bad at using bikes. just really bad at using bikes. I just, for whatever reason, every time I try to use them, they just don't do what I need them to. They don't do what I want them to, and I end up just being very angry at my bikes because of their inability to be effective. And that's just not good to have in a list. But now I've got some inceptors, who are basically just bikes with the deep strike ability and with some assault bolters. So they're like heavy bolter attack bikes, but with 2 heavy bolters, and they don't get the -1 for moving. And they fit my game style way more because they're designed to be, to run up front, drop in behind the enemy, and just shoot everything, which is really strong. And that's what I used to like about running with Ravenwing Strike Force back in 7th edition, was the ability to outflank the whole thing, keep them off the board turn 1, and outflank them all on turn 2, so that I was up in my enemy's face with my bikes. But even then, they would die too soon. And knowing that, maybe I change out some of my bikes. So, for instance, I used to run the Black Knights in my tournament list because on paper they look really good, they could be really effective, but they were just too expensive for what I needed them to do, and they would die too fast because they would draw too much aggro, and I couldn't support them well enough unless I made the Ravenwing an emphasis of my list. I needed to hold things back, and that's what I wanted to do with my list, was hold things back. And he was not going to be able to do that for me, So I had to look in that. You have to make some hard decisions, and you have to change things in order to make sure that everything in your list is doing what it should do, and that it can do it for you. Because there's plenty of people who can make super effective tournament lists with a bunch of Black Knights, but I can't. I just don't. It doesn't fit my playstyle. I don't know how to utilize them to their fullest potential, and they end up dying way too soon for me. And because of that, I can't just take them because everyone else says they're great. I can't just take them because every once in a while they're super great. If they're not going to reliably do what I need them to do, and they're not going to reliably do it in the manner that works best for me, then they can't be in my list. I love them. They're really great units. They're a lot of fun to use, but they're just not. I just can't use them well. That's what it comes down to. It's a failing of my own that I can't use them well, but that means that they can't go on my list, And I can try to get better, and I will always be trying to get better. But at the same time, I know how to run a gun line much better, and I know how to support a gun line much better. So why not go to your strengths and realize, and because you're going to have a lot more fun playing a game the way that you want to. So if you're really good at if you have a lot of fun being very assaulty, don't just run a gun line because it's better. That's boring. That doesn't fit your play style. There's other armies out there that are going to do what you need them to do. But for the Dark Angels, I can make a very effective gun line and not have to use the bikes, even though they're a big part of, what the army is. They're not the only thrust of the army, and because of that, I can emphasize other aspects of the list, of the army, of the codex, and be very much more effective in the battle than I could be if I tried to just run the bikes because. So that's kind of what I have to thoughts on these on honing lists and things to look out for when you're trying to make your list better and make it your New Year's resolution, your Woo Year's resolution, to make sure that your lists aren't a mess and clean them up and make them more effective, because that's how we become better generals, is knowing what your army can do and knowing how your army can do better. That's how you're going to do better. That's how you're going to make better lists, is by being very aware of what they're doing and being very aware of what's not doing what you need it to. So that's my thoughts. That's what I think going on. Let me know what you guys do. Do you guys have a method for honing your lists? Do you just kind of like play test it, and whatever doesn't do well, you take them out and replace it? Or do you have a method to it so that if a couple play tests things don't perform the way they should, do you take a look at what you did with them differently, ways that you can utilize them differently? Or do you look at to see maybe that on paper they should be doing a certain thing, but in reality they just aren't as effective at doing that as they should be? Either which way, those are all things that you can kind of do. Let me know what you guys do. Do you just play test the crap out of lists until you've got nothing left but the tight, strong basis of a list? Does every point get you work towards an objective? And that's what they should do. Obviously, ideally, every point that you put into a list should work towards winning you a battle. But oftentimes that's not the reality. And when do you make the call as to whether something is doing enough for you or not enough for you? Do you look over what different units you take? So, for instance, if you've got your troop choices, if what you're looking for is a screen, you probably don't want to be spending points on those troop choices that are superfluous. So if the whole point of that troop choice is to sit there and block another unit from getting at your gun line or getting at your squishy HQs or your squishy Death Star in the back line, then maybe you don't put a whole bunch of special weapons in them. Maybe you don't spend extra points. Maybe you run scouts instead of intercessors because you're saving yourself a whole bunch of points. So what do you do to go over your list? What do you do to hone it? What do you do to fine tune things? What makes a difference to you on whether or not a unit should be included in your tournament list? Let me know. Keep that conversation going down below. I really like keeping those conversations. I've gotten a lot of great ideas from the comments that you guys leave down below, and it makes me a better player. So I really appreciate it. It's a little bit of free gaming advice from you guys, and I appreciate that. So it's a back and forth. I definitely gained from your guys' perspective and your guys' expertise as much as I think I've dispensed information as well. So let me know what's going on with those. These things are going along pretty well. I've got that first coat of Caliban green on there. I'll go over with a second thin coat, and I'll go over with, and then I'll go in and paint the white on the emblems. I'll give it a wash, and then I'll glue them onto the shoulders. The benefit of using the liquid cement for plastic models, the plastic glue, is that it actually, and using acrylic paints, which is what I use acrylic based paint. So even my primer that I had before, the Model Masters primer, it's actually an acrylic primer. What it does is once acrylic paint dries, it's basically just plastic. The pigments are in plastic, so that glue will actually melt through those plastics, and it'll just make it part of that bond. So you can see on these guys, I painted their bodies before I glued on their guns, and they're strong on there. I could probably pop them off if I want to, but they're just not going to just pop off, which is great. So I can go ahead and like I said, I got primer on the back of these. I got some paint on the back of these. The glue is just going to melt right through that, and it's going to create it as part of the bond, and it won't be any less strong. If I was using a super glue, it would be less strong because the super glue is just a surface-to-surface contact adhesive, and what you're going to end up having is you're going to have paint-to-paint surface connection, and that can easily pop off, and it can be very weak. But because of the glue, just melts the paint and melts the plastic underneath the paint, and it just creates one mishmash mess that they seal together and just weld them together. So yeah, if you're going to be doing this, I would do it with the liquid glue, and you don't have to worry about scraping off paint. If you're going to be using super glue, like if you've got some fine cast models or metal models, then I would scrape off the excess paint that gets on those connection points before you glue them together, just to make sure that the super glue has proper surface-to-surface bond. But that's it. That's what I got going on for this week. I hope you guys have all enjoyed it. I certainly have. I have been Phil the Glacial Geek as always. And until next time, have fun.